Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. We're just waiting for all the people to join the room. Welcome wherever you're joining us from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we have people from all over the world and across all the time zones. So good morning to those that are having their morning coffee. Good morning to those that are closing off their day. Um, Welcome to the Cities Beyond Growth course. Where we really get into the question of how can we design thriving cities that prioritize well-being and prosperity for all over economic growth for just the few wealthy ones in our societies. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Sean Macheza and I'm joining you from the Netherlands. I work with the Transnational Institute in Amsterdam. I'm obliged to inform you right now that this session is being recorded and that it will be shared on the Moodle course environment. There is interpretation in multiple languages, and to find the button for the interpretation, you have to go to the Zoom interface, the bottom right corner, there's a More button, and that's where you're going to find the language of your choice. Please choose interpretation and click the language that you would like to hear. That way we can all participate in the course in the language of our choice. So just so everybody knows, same as what we had last week, we will have the possibility to ask questions of our speakers. And of course, as you can see in the practicalities, you can ask the questions in the chat. If there's a particular question that you think you would really like to hear asked to the course presenters, please give it a like, give it an upvote so that we prioritize that question, as we won't have enough time to go through all the questions. And those questions that cannot be answered during this session will be dealt with in the forum. And of course, at the end of the session, please complete your evaluation form. We really appreciate it when we get feedback on how the course is going. So thank you very much for that. As you might have recognized last week, we have breakout rooms in more languages than just the languages of the course. So you'll choose a breakout room of your choice. I'll give a bit more information when we get to the breakout rooms, but we have the breakout rooms in the last 10 minutes of the session, but you can stay for 30 minutes if you would like. Right. Now, let's do a quick recap of where we are on the course. This is the fourth week of this course, and we've covered quite a lot of room. We've covered quite a lot of content already on how we can build cities of the future that really prioritize the flourishing of human life and not only the making of money. In the first week, we looked at how care and democracy really underpin the idea of human flourishing, where people are taken care of, where there is time for family, where there is time for the human element in life and in cities, and then how democracy, participating in the everyday decision making in the spaces that we live in, how that is a fundamental part of designing cities that work. So in that first week, we really introduced the idea of care and democracy as principles that underpin the whole idea of future cities, post-growth cities. And then in the second week, we went a little bit into the issue of energy, because energy is not only fundamental to how cities function, but it also has multiple repercussions for how the planet functions. And indeed, of course, the repercussions we know that it has for climate. So we looked at situations where we have energy communities, different kind of interventions that people are making to reduce the carbon footprint of cities. And there was a very big conversation about whether we should be trying to create more green technology or maybe really trying to reduce the consumption of energy and focus on energy sufficiency. And there was a really great conversation there in the Moodle course forum. Last week, we zoomed in on the issue of housing presented by the organization Nazemi. And we had an overview of the global housing crisis in particular, how building more is not necessarily to solve the problem, that we don't really need more houses, we just need a different approach to how housing works. And we had some examples of interventions in Ireland and interventions in Vienna, in Austria, that try to bring different perspectives of how housing can work. So today we're going to do something different. We're going to go into looking at food. But before we get into today's topic, please, I'd like to just find out how everybody is arriving in this space. Like we know, as I always say, there are multiple things going on in the world. It doesn't seem to be getting better. If you focus on one particular strand, it looks like things are getting worse. But also at the same time, here you are interacting with people from all over the world, working together to really envision a better future. And for me, that's what always gives me hope. It's what always gives me the strength to keep going, to know that despite everything that's going on, everyone is working together to create a better world. So just in an emoji in the chat, just let us know how you're entering into this space today. How are you feeling? I'm feeling hopeful despite everything. And that is really because of your presence in this space today and the fact that we're working together to build a better world. And now let's go into today's issue. Today, we're going to be talking about food. So we'll look at food as a main driver of crisis, but also really as an important space for action with the possibility of great impact. José Bellver from our host organization for this session, the Spanish Ecosocial Research and Education Organization, FUHEM, is going to introduce us to this topic. It's going to give us a brief overview of the entire topic. But then we also have two other guests who are going to show us different perspectives of how we can deal with the issue of food. And we'll look at a bottom-up approach and top-down initiatives that can really make change happen. Andrea Calori is going to emphasize on enormous challenges faced by cities' food systems, but we'll give some examples of many that are actually taking initiative and solving some of these issues. And Nerea Morán will share community-based alternatives and initiatives that are taking place throughout the whole agri-food chain. So really interesting lineup. We're going to go really deep into this topic and hopefully create new pathways for conversation, also for our breakout rooms and for collaboration going forward. Let me not waste too much more of your time and introduce our first speaker, José Bellver. So as I said, José works at FUHEM. He holds an MA in International and Development Economics and a postgraduate degree in Analysis of Contemporary Capitalism. He's also taught at the University of Valladolid in Spain and worked as an advisor on sustainability for the Spanish Minister of Consumer Affairs. So his analysis focuses on economy-nature relations, particularly in their international dimension, with an emphasis on the socio-ecological impacts of consumption and digitalization, as well as the reflection on keys for socio-ecological transitions. He's also an activist, and beyond being working in general environmentalist movements, he's been involved for many years in Madrid's community-supported agriculture movement. José, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm going to hand over the mic to you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And it's also a pleasure for me to be here. So greetings to all of you from Madrid. So I guess it's impossible to think about any kind of socio-ecological transformation without considering something as essential to life as food. But beyond food as necessity, food systems have become one of the main factors contributing to the ecosocial crisis, as Sean was introducing. And by ecosocial crisis, what I want to emphasize here is the fact that the ecological and the social crises are not separate from each other, but have a common origin, which is in the economic factors that drive the transgression of planetary boundaries, and their consequences affect both the ecological and social spheres. I think it's important to point out that the structures and power relations that make up global capitalism simultaneously reinforce environmental degradation and social inequalities, also regarding food systems. In any case, please keep in mind that this will be just an introduction. You will have more, or you already have more information in the Moodle to dive deeper in the topic. And we'll be sharing some links. One of my colleagues, Pedro, from FUHEM, in the chat will be sharing some links as we give some data about different specific issues. Okay. So, why are we talking about food systems and not food production? That should be like the first question. Well, food systems encompass the set of activities and actors involved in the various stages of food production, processing, distribution, consumption, and disposal of food. In other words, it includes everything and everyone that contributes to getting food from farm to fork and beyond. And this perspective also considers the broad economic, social, and natural environments in which food systems operate. So, as I've said before, the reason to address food systems is that they are an important part of the problem, but also an important part of the solution. So, as it was written in the 2019 Eat Lancet Commission report on healthy diets from sustainable food systems have the potential to nurture human health and support environmental sustainability. However, they are currently threatening both. And what are the ecosocial impacts and risks associated with food systems? Well, on the environmental ground, the latest report from the Eat Lancet Commission, which was published actually this same month, provides a good summary of this as it illustrates how food systems are actually responsible for the breaching of 5 of the 6 planetary boundaries that were already transgressed, namely land use change, biodiversity loss, freshwater resource disruption, imbalances in nutrient cycles, and the significant part of climate change. So,
Just a quick interruption there, Jose. Your
yeah,
slides are not showing. If
the
you
slides.
could, yes.
Oh, just wait a minute. Is it
Oh,
working
there we
now?
go. Apologies to everyone.
I'm sorry for that. Is it working now?
Yes, we see the slides now.
Okay, I'm sorry for that. So I hope you didn't miss too many slides. This one was the important one because it illustrates this planetary boundaries transgression from the food system side. And yeah, so what I was saying is that without going too much into detail into every each of these impacts, let me just point out a few issues, starting from emissions and climate change. The global food system is responsible for around 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, making it the second largest contributor to global warming behind the energy sector. So, as food systems have shifted from predominantly rural to industrialized and globalized systems, emissions from transport, packaging, retail, and waste disposal have increased significantly in the last 50 years. This is something that you can read in one of the texts that you have in the Moodle from Andrea Calori and colleagues. However, the vast majority, as you can see, of these emissions originate from changes in land use and agricultural practices. Also, in terms of biodiversity loss and land use, a couple of facts. One is that as the United Nations Environmental Program has identified, agriculture is actually a threat to 86% of the endangered species. So this is particularly destabilizing in the sense that there is a drastic decline in essential pollinating species or species that provide natural forms of pest control. Also, agriculture is responsible for 90% of global deforestation, which is actually directly related with land use changes and biodiversity loss. So, in short, the way we produce and the way we consume directly influences health of the planet and thus its stability. The worst thing about it is that this instability jeopardizes the very foundations of food systems. For example, in terms of climate, agriculture is one of the sectors most exposed and vulnerable to climate risks, given its heavy dependence on water, soil, and stable climatic conditions. So a couple of facts here that you can see in the slide. Climate change has already slowed agricultural productivity growth by around 21% since the 60s, and global warming is expected to reduce crop yields by up to 12% by 2050 and 25% by the end of the century. So in contrast, more biodiverse and climate resilient systems through diversification, agroforestry, and soil management offer greater stability and faster recovery in the face of climate extremes. On the social ground, the first thing to note is the fact that while 700 million people suffer from hunger worldwide and 2.3 billion from food insecurity, a third of the food that is produced is actually wasted. And furthermore, this overproduction lowers food prices, but also reduces the profits of agricultural workers. In the global north, subsidies protect agricultural sectors to a certain extent, as you know, but this also forces the export of surplus staple crops that undermine producers in the global south. Regarding or in terms of public health, conventional farming also creates conditions that spreads diseases as it reduces genetic diversity, allowing viruses to spread rapidly through livestock. Related deforestation destroys the natural barriers that protect humans from viruses circulating among wildlife, or the abuse of antimicrobials can lead to resistance in viruses and bacteria. But it also entails potential health effects of pesticides, as some act as endocrine disruptors, and the exposure to chemical pesticides is also linked to all kinds of chronic diseases. Regarding this, it is actually agricultural workers that are particularly exposed to these harmful pesticides, them and their families or communities. And these and other risks, both in agriculture and in meat processing industries, disproportionately affect low-income workers, many of which are racialized and immigrants. Furthermore, mental health problems are more prevalent in agricultural sector due to unpredictability of economic and environmental circumstances or the risks of spatial and occupational isolation. Also, on the consumption side, the dominant food model increasingly encourages unhealthy dietary changes. So, according to the Global Burden of Disease report, more than 10% of deaths are associated with poor diet, and 3 out of 15 leading risk factors from premature death are actually related to dietary risk factors such as high sodium intake, low fruit intake, or low whole grain intake. Additionally to that, the excessive consumption of meat, especially red meat and preserved or processed meats, not only contributes significantly to climate change, but also causes chronic diseases such as diabetes and various types of cancer, or obesity, which has tripled worldwide since the 70s. So to put a positive spin on this, increasing vegetable consumption, on the other hand, from 0 to around 300, 400 grams per day was associated to 20 to 30% reduction in the risk of different diseases. So I guess we've shared a link to that reports that you can explore. But of course, there is also here a question of social justice at on different scales, since it is people with fewer economic resources who have lower levels of health and suffer most from the consequences of climate change and environmental hazards. Some illustrative data on this, for example, is the fact that 30% of the world's population could not afford a healthy diet in 2022. And these inequalities not only exist between rich and poor countries, but also within the countries, between neighborhoods, between social classes, or between urban and rural areas. For example, in Spain, there was a study that found that children from lower income families are twice as likely to be obese as those compared to those from higher income households. Also, Carolyn Steele, who you will find from who you will find a TED Talk that we posted in the Moodle, um, has accurately reflected in her research how in many parts of the global north, lower income neighborhoods have more limited access to healthier foods and greater exposure to ultra processed foods. So, no matter how much technological innovation there is, if these inequalities remain, we won't achieve any food security for all. From also from an environmental justice point of view, the diets of the richest 30% of the world's population contribute to more than 70% of the environmental pressures of food systems. So, sorry, what's
Three
behind?
minutes.
Okay, what's behind this? Broadly speaking, food systems are organized around the industrial food production for profit rather than to meet social needs within planetary boundaries. One of the key issues here is industrialization, since much of the world's food is produced using ecologically simplified and highly mechanized agricultural systems, which rely mainly on synthetic pesticides and fertilizers from fossil fuels, high water consumption, privatized and genetically modified seeds, intensive livestock farming based on feed, antibiotics, and hormones. And another key issue here is, of course, corporate capitalism, where, as you know, privatization, mechanization, monoculture, and specialization have been central to the development of capitalist relations in the countryside. And this has gone through a process of increasing capital concentration. As you can see in the figure from the IPES food document that you can also find in the Moodle, in most of the segments of the current agri-food system, only a few companies dominate the markets, from the agriculture inputs industry to global food trade, including food processing and retail trade. Additionally to this, today 70% of the world's farmlands is owned or controlled by 1% of livestock farmers and agricultural producers. So in the end, these are the companies that determine how food is grown, who grows it, and where. And what can we do about it? And I'm finishing with this slide. I'm sure that our guest speakers will share with us some key insights, but in general terms, um, and in the same framework as both rows, I would say that agroecology is the main alternative nowadays to corporate and highly industrialized agri-food systems. So agroecology, sorry, is based on a comprehensive approach combining ecological, social, and economic dimensions, bringing together science, practices, and social movements. As a science, it is based on centuries of experience in biodiverse and socially sensitive farming. At the same time, it draws on cutting-edge research to find new ways in increase yields. As a set of practices, it feeds millions of people around the world through a continuous process of cultivation, learning, and adaptation. It also advocates for reducing dependence on external inputs, shorter food chains, improving biodiversity, increasing resilience to climate change with a political, participatory, and action-oriented vision. And finally, as a movement, it brings together farmers, food justice activists, policymakers, and researchers addressing the interconnected crisis while promoting alternative structures and vindicating territorial rights, traditional knowledge, and ecosocial justice. So finally, let me just say that the transition to agroecological food systems is essential for rescaling consumption and waste generated by cities, where more than half of the world's population lives in ways that are socially just for workers, communities, and territories. So I'll leave it here and so that our guest speakers can get more into detail also from practical experiences. And thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jose. Such a great overview of the fundamental problems we face in the area of food. And already, I think you already let out some really great threads to follow there in the conversation. And indeed, for introducing the basic points we need to start from if we are going to move forward towards food systems that are healthy for people and for the planet and are also fair. So now I'd like to invite our first guest speaker, Andrea Calori, to take the floor and to introduce us to the role of urban food policies for this transformation. So Andrea Calori is a PhD expert in territorial policies, local development, and sustainable food systems. Since the early 90s, he's been working with local, national, and international institutions and has taught regional planning and local development at the Polytechnic University of Milano for 10 years. He's one of the co-founders of the Italian Social Economy Network and has been president of Urgency, a world coalition of networks of community-supported agriculture. And he's been an activist in the civil society mechanism within the food aid organization World Committee on Food Security. Currently, he's president of ESTA, an independent and nonprofit research center that works on a systemic approach to sustainability, where he's also the scientific person responsible for methodologies and the researches supporting the food policy of Milan, amongst many other roles. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us, and I hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sean, for the presentation. Good afternoon for everyone. And thank you also to Jose for the fantastic synthesis of a huge complexity, the complexity of the food system. And what I'm trying now to say to you is something about what we can do as a social movement, as activists, as experts, and so on, as people, together with Nerea, with the two different perspectives. The first perspective in my hands is the so-called top-down perspective, which is not really top-down, but it is about the role of institutions. How can we, as social activists, as concerned people, different definitions we can have, how we can deal with the institution to work in the complexity described by Jose before, to do something for the sustainability, I can say, of this complexity. So this is my presentation. Can you see it? And
Yes.
so the title is that the role of urban food policies for more sustainable cities, because I used to think about the food system as a way to touch every point of sustainability, starting from the cities. So there is a dynamic between practices and policies. So I told before that I'm speaking about the role of institutions, but it is not really necessary top-down, because there is a dynamic. In my experience, there is a dynamic between practices, social practices, and institutional policies. I don't know if you are familiar in some way with the food movement around the world, but there are a lot of social movement in all the possible level, local, regional, national, international. And so these are the logo of some of them to say that, I don't know if you know La Via Campesina. La Via Campesina is the most important association in the world concerning agriculture. Most important, yeah, really for the number of the people. It is estimated that about 200 million people are part of La Via Campesina. So it's really a huge association related to one economic activities. No, it's nothing similar in any other kind of economic world. So agriculture is really the basis of a lot of associations and movement. And La Via Campesina is not only about agriculture, it's about the complexity of the food system, because La Via Campesina people belonging to La Via Campesina, which is a kind of umbrella association. There are local, regional, and national associations as part of La Via Campesina. In Latin America, in the 80s and 90s, they were really an important part of the change from the dictatorship into the democratic context and constitutions. So it's not only about agriculture. And on the right, sorry, on the right you see some photos that I took in China about 10 years ago, to say that also in countries with in which the democracy is not so really mature or diffused, agriculture and food has an important role in creating communities. And then you have also local associations. These are the logos of some association that, especially in the US, in the United States, to say that in urban context, the food starting from agriculture is part of the urban life. No? Okay. So when I speak about institution, I say, okay, let's do one step beyond. We are not mad thinking about the role of institution in social movement, no? Because sometimes we tend to say, okay, I'm part of a social movement, I am an activist, I want to do something by myself, with my community. It's okay, obviously. It's the brick of an important building, but if we want to build a building, so if we want to create a sustainable food system, we do need something else, because it's important, the brick in a building, but we need a more complex approach to our interest if we want to change the system, because the system is something far beyond, it's really one step beyond our common activity. So the problem is a problem of effectiveness, not to be mad and to say, okay, I want to change the world. Let's do something to understand some of the levers and how to move from direct sales, social supply chains, family and community experiences into a more complex approach to local and sustainable food system. So it's really important to do something in your community. Without this, we cannot have nothing else. But then if we want to move into a systemic approach and to change the system, we need other kind of bricks. So Nerea will give you some interesting experiences about what you can do, no? At the local level, which is absolutely the first step. But then if we want to move in a systemic approach by involving also the institution, yes, José before told that food system is not only food production, it's something really complex. This is a kind of image. I used to collect images and schemes about the food system. There are really a lot of them. I choose this one because it is really complex. It's really difficult to understand the complexity. But just to say the complexity is really complex. Oh, okay, it's a joke of word, but to say how to manage this. And so if we think about the food system, starting from a local level, really, not the world, but the local level, there is a soil management, how to plan our land, how to use the water, how to regulate the water. So it's something in the hand of local institution, urban planning, for example, local commerce, the markets, the transport, the logistics. These are part of the food system. A lot of trucks. We have a lot of trucks, vans and cars moving around in our cities. It's not the traffic, generally speaking, but it's something related to food, because we do need every day fresh fruit, fresh vegetable, fresh food in our table. So there are a lot of transport which are related to the food system. Transport and mobility is in the hands of local authorities, local institutions, the municipalities. And so the relation between city and country, settlement organization, how we consume, what is the consumption of energy on the whole food chain, our fridge, refrigerator, for example. Then food security is part of the welfare policy. Health, lifestyle means how do we consume, how we think about food, what we buy in the supermarket, the market, and so on. And then the identity. So if you think about the food system, there are a lot of different topics which are really related to the policies of a local authority. So if you speak with your mayor, you can ask it to your mayor, okay, what you are doing for food? And they say, oh, boy, maybe for something about food canteens, something about, I don't know, education. Yes, but if you think about the food system, the complexity of the food system include a lot of topics which are really, really typical of local authorities. So territorial planning, commerce, transport, energy, culture, welfare, and so on. So you can think about food, the food system, as a way to manage our development model at the local level, starting from the local policies in the hands of any kind of cities in the world. And so the step beyond is what are the institutional roles? What are the policies that you can act at the local level? Also being an activist, how to deal with your local institution and to push for a more sustainable food system, starting from the dialogue with your local institution. So because food is environment, commerce, transport, settlement, and so on. And so what we call a food policy, a general policy on food, is a comprehensive strategy concerning all the aspects of the food system. So the aspect is, as I said before, environment, commerce, transport, and so on. A food policy is something related to all these topics. So the food system can be seen as a driver, as the basis for a more sustainable orientation of our development in our territory, in our city. Okay, so it's a good way to speak in a more concrete way about sustainability. You know, a lot of criticism about sustainability, but starting from food can be a good way to deal with it. And so just to give you some example, there are hundreds and hundreds of cities really engaged in the world on urban food policies. And also there are also networks and associations in the world working on the role of food and sustainability of the food system in urban context. The most well-known and the biggest one in the world, like this kind of association network, is the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, signed in 2015 in the city of Milan. Now there are about 300 cities in the world engaged in this kind of pact, but also there are important association and networks in this institution, like ICLEI, Eurocities, C40, and so on. So there are association and networks in the world working together to promote more sustainable food system in the cities, in urban contexts, by promoting policies going in that direction. In this kind of dynamic between top-down and bottom-up. Okay. José before told that the food system is important also for the relation between people, communities, and it's something related also to democracy. And so when we deal with an institution, when we have a connection with the institution, we can have different kind of relations. And one kind of relation is to create institutions at the local level to better formalize and to have a more clear relation between social actions and institutional policies. The example are the so-called Food Policy Council or Food Council. There are different names in different languages, in Spanish, in Chinese, in Portuguese, and so on. But Food Council or Food Policy Council is the the name in English language. So these are the example of some of the hundreds and hundreds food council in the world. What are the food council? Are places in which a more systemic way to deal about food are being put into a kind of dialogue with the institution to address local policies or to suggest policies or to define policies. So it's a way to say, okay, if I work as an expert, maybe I'm a farmer, I'm a technical expert in food education, food safety or something else. I have my role and my sector, but as a citizen, I have a comprehensive approach to food, which is something similar to a systemic approach. These kind of councils are places in which there are experience of dialogue in a more systemic way to speak about food and to suggest policies, more integrated policies to local institutions. Nothing is perfect in the world, but these are a lot of examples in which we can see the gradual shift into a more systemic approach to push for local food policies for a sustainable food system. I give you some example in the last minutes to say what kind of policies for agroecology at the local level. So which is the space between social action in a more systemic way and the local activities, the local policies of our municipalities in this dialogue between... Sorry?
3 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So, for example, you can integrate local agriculture in urban development, in the land use planning, for example. So your mayor can say, I don't do anything about agriculture. Yes, but you plan the land. So urban planning is part of agriculture. Then you can integrate local agriculture in poverty reduction strategies, in poverty in welfare, for example. You can work with some fiscal levers. You can facilitate local partnership between producer and consumers as a part of a social cohesion policies. These are only some titles, very general, maybe generic, but it's a way to be creative and to say what is the space of food system in sectorial policies. One famous example is the example of the city of Rosario, Argentina. And more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they started to think about agriculture as a part of urban policy by creating a kind of land bank with private and public lands. In this land, with some kind of fiscal actions like tax credit and so on, they trained a lot of people to start new economic activities in a moment in which Argentina suffered for the complete failure of the economic system because of the international banks and so on. There is a long story in Argentina. So it was a way to fight poverty, to plan the lands, to create community engagement and to work for social inclusion by creating local markets and so on. So new economic systems based on something that was not existing before. So it's a really new perspective, starting from an emergency. Or another more recent example, but really more complex, maybe in Porto Alegre in Brazil, in which there is a comprehensive territorial plan called the Green Belt around the city, which is managed with agroecological approaches in which you can create ecosystem services for the city and the territorial environment around the city, but also you create the opportunity for new economic activities, new markets for fresh food for the people related to school canteens in order to feed the children, the students with fresh organic food for health, for better health. So there is a network of urban horticulture. there are urban farms and so on. So there are connection with the universities and technical schools to train people. So it's an urban policy with a lot of connection between environment, territorial planning, trade, commerce, and so on, welfare, health, that use the food system as a way to rethink the city. It's a long-term perspective based on a lot of local activities. And Nerea will speak about some of these activities based on social actions. But in this case, this can be the perspective, how to include this kind of social action into policies to push for a more sustainable food system, but also more sustainable cities in a more participatory and democratic approach, because everything is related to democratic approach with civil society participation and so on. So I can close my presentation and give the floor to Sean and then Nerea.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Such great practical examples and definitely pathways that can also be replicated, I hope, in multiple other situations. Great presentation. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to remind folks that if you have questions for our guest speakers, please feel free to ask them in the general chat. And if you like a question, please upvote it. Our next speaker then, of course, is Nerea Morán, who is a PhD assistant professor in the Department of Urban and Territorial Planning at the Polytechnic University of Madrid. She has participated in several projects and networks related to agri-food systems, sustainability, and urban and territorial resilience. Her work focuses on the relationship between urbanism and food, and starting with community gardens as part of agroecological social movements, and then moving on to peri-urban agriculture. And she's expanded her field of analysis to include the territorialization of the agri-food system. I'll let her explain what all this is. Nerea, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jose. I'm sharing my presentation and I will start now. Oh. Sorry. It's okay. Okay, now. Okay. So good afternoon. In my talk today, I'd like to share a few examples of bottom-up initiatives along the food system, the whole agri-food chain, from food production to how we dispose of food waste. Most of the examples are Spanish, but I'm sure that you can find similar or better initiatives in your cities and your territories. The focus will be mainly urban, but stressing the importance of the urban-rural linkages and connections. Within this agroecological perspective that Jose has shown, where labor conditions, ecosystem preservation, landscapes protection, and proximity between production and consumption are key issues. So let's start with production, and maybe community gardens have played a key role in cities making food issues visible, because they are amazing spaces for agroenvironmental education, where people can learn how to grow food, but also how long does it take, how much care does it take, and they can learn about agroecological practices, about the importance of the seasons, about local varieties, about reproducing and exchanging seeds. And not only people involved in the management of these community gardens, but also people who visit them occasionally for a workshop or a talk. In Madrid, community gardens appeared about 15 years ago. They were started by neighborhood and environmental groups linked to social centers and local assemblies. And from the beginning, they worked as a network. They looked for a dialogue with local authorities in order to make these activities, to formalize these activities and to secure the access to the land. So now most of the community gardens in Madrid are under a municipal program where the city council provides the land, green areas, but also some basic facilities as fences or tool sets, access to municipal nurseries to get fruit trees or vegetables. And while the gardens are still managed by community associations. But we can go further. Cities could host a wide horticultural diversity, not only community gardens or school gardens or gardens for elderly people, but also we could have therapeutical gardens or gardens linked to universities in order to develop research and innovation in agroecology. And also small-scale production for commercial purposes. We can imagine a kind of edible green infrastructure from the city center to the peri-urban areas with a variety of plots in which a variety of people and functions can be met. So some of these new areas for food production in the cities could be edible forest, that combine fruit trees with shrubs and vegetable crops or herbs that are usually based on permaculture principles, but also urban vineyards. And I have this beautiful example in Paris. This is in Montmartre, Paris, and this historic vineyard is managed by an association called La Commune Live de Montmartre. And the origin of this space was in the 1930s, where there was a development plan for this area, but the neighborhood was mobilized because this was one of the few open spaces in the neighborhood. So they were able to protect it, and now it is a vineyard, and the profits from the wine goes to social projects in the neighborhoods. Many cities like New York or London or Paris have also embraced urban beekeeping, and Slovenia has a long tradition in beekeeping, and there is an association, the Urban Beekeepers Association, that connects and support people and entities that have beehives in the rooftops, but they also run training programs as the one in the prison and in the Ljubljana prison. So this can be a very interesting approach. Some of the food production or urban agriculture projects have a focus or are developed in the framework of social economy. There are a few examples in Spain, like this garden in the convent of an old convent located in the city center of Vitoria-Gasteiz, that is managed as a training space for migrant people, and the food grown there is sold in the garden, but also in the city market. We have several examples like this in the grounds of religious orders in several cities. There is a interesting initiatives in Toronto, Soul Food Farms, that that grows organic vegetables In vacant lots and parking spaces inside the city, they do it in raised boxes because the soil is not good, but they can produce more than 30 tons of fresh food per year. And they have a staff of about 20 people, full-time employees. That this is a social inclusion enterprise. Some of the employees face challenges as mental health issues, and 10% of the food they grow goes to food justice initiatives as community kitchens in the neighborhoods they are located. But even though cities can offer spaces for food growing, cities cannot feed themselves. So the farmland around the cities, the traditional agricultural areas and the activity, the farming activity remain essential for us to survive, and they must be protected. Some urban-rural alliances in defense of these territories and this agricultural land are happening in different cities. This is the example of Perlorta in Valencia, that is a social movement that has been fighting for decades in the defense of this farmland, this historic horticultural landscape around the city. They promote local food chains, but they also monitor the urban plans. So if there is any development plan that threatens the farmlands, they do allegations to it and they do pacific actions. They have created this very interesting initiative that is the Citizen Observatory of this territory, of the Huerta, that is a popular inventory and a collective database and a collective map to keep track of land use changes and degraded areas or abandoned plots. So everyone can join and be part of this initiative. Let's move to the processing stage, where we can find these school canteens or the public collective canteens in hospitals and so on, also as a space for making the food chain more sustainable. There are school communities linked to agroecological networks that are reclaiming sustainable, local and fairer school canteens, but public support is essential here, because the public procurement policies are the ones that define where the food comes from, what kind of catering services we have, what kind of menus. So there is a double approach here. Also there are inspiring cases as Espigoladors in Catalonia, in this processing part of the food chain. The word espigolar means gleaning, that is collecting what's left after the harvest, and they act as a social economy model, connecting three goals: reducing food waste, because they use this agri-food that is not accepted in the supermarkets because it does not fit the aesthetical standards. They ensure access to healthy food, and they create job opportunities for people at risk of social exclusion. Moving on to distribution, we can find here the best known examples of urban-rural linkages through alternative food networks. If we think about the short food supply chains and consumer groups and community-supported agriculture schemes, where producers, farmers and consumers are directly connected and they have long-term commitments. However, these groups, these are not always the most practical option for farmers because they often need to diversify their sales to gain more economic stability, and they find challenges. Small farmers face great challenges in selling to shops, restaurants, or collective catering due to logistics and to quantity and continuity of food to meet the demands of these restaurants. So a good solution to this problem is the creation of regional food hubs or sustainable food hubs, agroecological food hubs, managed by farmers or producers associations that join forces to offer a shared offer of their products and to share distribution routes in order to make them more effective, and they manage collective logistics. Still, experiences in Spain with these food hubs show that it's very hard to make them sustainable in an economic dimension of sustainability through self-management, because they need investments in facilities, in vehicles, in transport, in staff, and so on. So here also public support is often needed. There is a successful example in Navarra, Ecoalde, which offers local, fresh, seasonal, organic products not only to consumer groups, but only to schools, hospitals, restaurants, and shops. But this is managed by producers that they have received public funds in order to maintain this food hub. Inside the city, back inside the city and the distribution of food, we can also talk about these food justice networks that help to collect and distribute food to people in vulnerable situations. In Spain, most of these networks take the form of solidarity food banks, but here the
3
access.
minutes. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. To fresh food is an issue. If you have heard about food deserts, so we should think how the surpluses from agroecological farmers could be used to feed these people, to help these food justice networks. Sorry. To scale up the impact of consumer groups, we have also the idea of cooperative supermarkets, and that there are some examples, and that they are very interesting because they are a self-management model where each member contributes with a few hours per month in the supermarket tax, and this way they can reduce costs and keep prices fair, so a wider diversity of people can join these supermarkets, and they have agroecological sources, but the prices are low. So in Madrid we have La Osa, in Paris is La Louvre, and in Madrid, in New York is this Food Cop that there is a film documentary. So to close the nutrient cycle, we have also composting. Community composting is happening in community gardens or in school yards, but it could also be an economic activity through agrocomposting if it's made directly in the peri-urban areas and do it by the farmers. And I like to finish highlighting how bottom-up initiatives can make visible needs that public authorities don't fully need. But if public institutions support, give space and give resources to these networks, these initiatives can have more impact. So this is where bottom-up initiatives and municipal policies can meet in order to develop public community collaboration schemes in which that could be an optimal model, because it involves the public authorities' commitment and resources, but it keeps management in the hands of community, of the community. A management model like this could be applied to emerging facilities that we will need in the future, or that we are needing nowadays in the present. And one example could be this of community food centers that are happening in Canada, and they are managed by an association, and they bring together vegetable gardens, community kitchens, and community dining areas, but they also offer training through workshops in nutrition and cooking skills. And they are also a space for political education and for empowerment. So I think we could develop some public community collaborations in new facilities, emerging facilities like this. So bottom-up initiatives don't just fit cities, but they can help us to reimagine how we live together and how we take care of our landscapes, and how we connect, reconnect, and make virtuous linkages with the farmers around the cities. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nerea. What a great presentation and a lot of detail there. We only have very short time for question and answer. And I feel like the question that we'd already pinpointed that seems to have the best support, you have somewhat covered, but perhaps we can just zoom on it a little bit together. So the main question that had come up that we thought we would ask is, someone wanted to know, how do we overcome the issue of scale, right? The thing with social initiatives and community gardens and growers, I think it's Emma who says this, is that they can't meet the huge food needs of global populations. How do we overcome this issue of scale? Is it possible to have sustainable food production at large scale? And I think Stein has a different shade to the same question, which is, how can these initiatives scale up without harming the soil, the environment, but still be a good and complete alternative to the big corporations, supermarket and agro industry, I guess. I know it's a broad question, but I'll pitch it to both you, Nerea, and Andrea. How would you respond to this question? Perhaps let's start with you, Andrea.
Okay, very synthetic. Okay, if we are speaking about the big scale, necessarily we need big actors. We have to deal with the big actors. And I was saying that it's important to think about the building, but there is no building without any kind of bricks. So if the first step is to think about, which is in the hand of many people, no? Because we can be activists in the example shown by Nerea. No? There are a lot of small initiatives, and one way to scale up is to create networks between small initiatives, which is a way to put together the bricks. And then another way, another step, one step beyond, I told before, is to speak with your local institution, municipality, district, province, or whatever, to say that your initiative can be seen as something related to production or market or education or welfare and so on. If you are an agroecological farmer or interested in agroecology, you can speak about with your institution about land planning, how to give different criteria for local markets, for example, how to use fiscal levers or some kind of facilitations or including criteria for agroecology, inland planning, and so on. So if you split your activity in the institutional language is made by sector. So you have to think about different sector. So the first level is to create a network between other local initiatives, Another level can be to translate into institutional language your activity and to speak with your local authority is another way to scale up. Then you can think about higher level of action, but the bigger is the initiative, the bigger is the deal, and also the capability, and also the knowledge, but also the acknowledgement. Okay, you need more shoulder in some way, but you can do something also at the local level in this way to scale up.
Awesome, thank you. I think that really harks back to the topic that we had in our first session on democracy, right? How actually participating in the local democratic space and then perhaps using that as a mechanism to scale up to make bigger impact. Nerea, you already spoke a bit about this. I remember listening when you're talking about regional hubs and really joining distributive networks and all that. But how do we then scale up from your perspective?
I think this networks approach is necessary because if we want to protect small farmers, small producers, they need to join forces. So, but they also need the institutions' support. And I shown some examples, but they are very hard to maintain. I think the public authorities could not only protect the land, but also should look for ways to protect the activities and the proximity and the local food supply chains. And with the demonstrative actions or giving space to another kind of economy is needed, because if we want to compete in the same rules for the big corporations, it is very difficult. There must be some legal framework that pushes and supports these alternative agroecological initiatives and perspectives.
Awesome. Now, we only have a couple of minutes before we have to go into breakout rooms. So I'll give this opportunity to ask if there is something that you heard in Nerea's presentation, Andrea, that you felt really highlighted or added something to what you wanted to put across, just with the last minute remaining. Also, perhaps some last reflections on today's session.
I can say that there is a real universe of creativity. It's a galaxy of creativity in the world. There are a lot of local initiatives which are really, really transformative, out of the common grounds, the common knowledge, and so on. Also mixing voluntary activities and new job creation. So there is a lot of creativity, and so it's really something that it's really inspiring. Outside of discipline, outside of sectors and so on, there are a lot of people doing something really new.
Okay, I see we have a bit more time. So, Andrea, somebody asked, degrowth implies the need of changing land uses and reintroducing agriculture in the territories that nowadays have erased food production from their territory. What could be the policy approach for that in your perspective? I hope I rendered the question right.
Very, very synthetic, because we have only a few seconds. One thing that it's really impressive to me is that in a lot of developed countries, territorial planning is really totally separate to agricultural policies. The separation is a disciplinary separation, starting from the university, from the technical people, and so on. So one issue about soil quality is how to include soil quality criteria in territorial planning. And in the chat, I wrote an answer to one question about soil quality. And one way is to think about for a municipality, but also for a region, a district, is when a public authority owns a land, to rent the land, one opportunity for agroecology is to include agroecological criteria in the tenders, in the public calls. So when an institution promotes a tender to rent a land, without any kind of criteria, one step beyond is to include agroecological criteria if you want to rent a public land. Is a way to improve the soil quality. It's something that can be quite simple, but then we can think about a lot of different things. But it could be a way to improve soil quality by combining territorial planning, territorial management, land management, and agroecological criteria, and so soil quality.
Yeah. So how? Last question to you, Nerea. I hope we still have a bit of time. Maybe for Andrea, if you also have a quick moment, what should then be the legal framework for local, national, or even continental agroecology policies? A big question, I know, but what main points do you think immediately jump out for you when you think about the legal frameworks?
Oh, I'm not so sure how to put it in this legal language, but I think is the land is first, the communities, how the activities could be fixed to that land. We have the urban planning as also legal documents that show what uses we should give to land, and all the commercial norms or regulations. I'm not so sure how much what else to
Yeah, I understand
say.
it's a very broad question,
Yes,
but last
everything.
remarks.
It's everything.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there are so many questions that are in the chat that I wish we could have gotten to, but of course, this is a very condensed session and very little time for all of them. So I'd like to give my thanks to our speakers for today, Andrea Calori and Nerea Morán, and José Bellver, who has given us a great introduction to today's session. Much appreciated. And I'm sure what they've shared has given us quite a lot of input to discuss in our breakout rooms, which you're now going to be able to join right now. So this week you can stay till 5:20 in the breakout rooms if you feel so inclined. We have two types of breakout rooms. The 10-minute one that will for people that want to be done at the top of the hour, and 30-minute ones for people who might want to who have the wherewithal to spend a little more time. If you have to leave at the top of the hour just during the 10-minute one, however, you can also stay longer if you want. Before you go into the breakout rooms, please fill in the evaluation survey. As the course goes along, we evolve, we try to make things better by incorporating all of your feedback. So it is gold to us, whatever you think about the session. Please, when you do have your breakout rooms, please save one last minute to come back to the chat and share quick bullet points of what you have discussed in your session, just so we get a bit of an idea of what people are talking about and see maybe how we can incorporate it into the upcoming sessions. So I really hope that today's time together has been inspiring for you in terms of assessing the problems and also really focusing on the solutions in the area of food. And once you've completed the short survey, you can move to the breakout rooms. I think we can guide the conversation in the breakout rooms really with looking at what are the best ways to articulate bottom-up and top-down initiatives. And also maybe everyone can share any other interesting examples in their context that they think could be replicated elsewhere and could help in different contexts elsewhere. There are different language groups. They're all labeled directly. Please join a breakout room, and do remember to share what you discuss in the breakout rooms. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Our luta continua, the struggle continues. As long as we hold hands and continue together, we will find these solutions. The world can only get better. And thank you to everybody behind the scenes, the whole team that's come together to put together this course. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing everybody next week, and maybe some people right now in the breakout rooms where we can have a more intimate conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you cannot see the breakout rooms, you